All right, today we're going to take the if statement and go a little bit further with it. And I'm going to start by looking at or making one specific thing clear, and that is the Boolean. So we have done variables already, but we really didn't talk too much to the Boolean. So let's go ahead and do that. So if you type in BOO, and you'll see two of these guys, a big Boolean and a small Boolean. We're going to start off with this small Boolean. And we're going to say, it can be anything. Let's just not pick average. We're going to put test or something like that, or maybe just temp so we can take it out later. Equals true. And what we want to do is just place this into here. Now, when we run this, every time we go through it, no matter what we put in here, it's going to go into the you failed here. And the reason why I wanted to show you this is for two reasons. One, just to tell you that this is available. We can make this true or we can make this false. But the other thing is to stress this is actually a variable inside here. So when it evaluates, in fact, I'm just going to take you all the way back here. When it evaluates this, it turns it into a variable, and that variable is a Boolean. That Boolean is either true or it's false. That's it. That's how this computer is going to make this work. So if you think about this, this is almost like a statement that converts these three things into one simple variable. Now let's go ahead and do the else if section of this. So before we are throwing a message box saying you failed and you should probably drop the course if you're having a problem. That was good to demonstrate it. I'm not a big fan of putting things in message boxes a lot because you're constantly trying to click them out. So if you remember up here, our label 1 or our label title, before when we hit the compute button, let's go ahead and do 0, and I'm going to put anything but zeros in there so I only get one of these boxes. It'll give me the you failed, and it says your hello, your average is found, right? And it tells us our average. Why don't we instead telling them that average is found, why don't we go ahead and put you failed in there. In fact, I'm just going to copy and steal this. And we're going to put this. And since we don't need the parentheses anymore, that's particular to the message box, we can just leave it like that. And let's do one other thing. I'm going to do this. Oops. Actually, I didn't want to do that. So now if we run it and put the 3 zeros in here, we get you failed, you should probably drop the course. Now this plus equals, we're going to talk about more when we get into loops. But really what this says is that I'm going to take this and add it on to what was originally there. This will make sense when we get into the loops and we start doing addition. This is a simple way of not getting rid of your original piece. Okay, now as you can see, it's also too large at this point, so we're going to have to play with this a little bit. And so let's go ahead and fix these two pieces. First off, maybe we should move it over here a little bit. I'm going to hit the organizer, get it out of alphabetical order here for the properties. I'm also going to go to the text align, and I'm going to put it in the middle. I also have auto size on here, so let's go ahead and turn that to false. So let's give it a quick run to see how it does the initial piece. And as you can see, it's only allowing for the find there. So let's go ahead and expand that out and maybe a little bit down too. So find your average. Actually, you got lucky that that hit the middle and it looks good. And I'm going to do 0, 0, oops, 0. And let's go ahead and compute it. And so now it falls nice onto our formatting, keeping everything nice in the center. You could left justify that as well. I think for titles, it's just natural to have them kind of centered, so I like it that way. So, but you can do it whatever way you wish. I don't know why, but I also want to move it up. You really don't need to move it up a whole lot, to be honest, because this box is actually bigger than what's probably ever going to be in it. So it might look like it's floating a little bit. Yeah, maybe one more thing. Maybe we'll do a bold on there as well. So get to the font, go ahead and do true. And let's just check it out one more time. Doing a stepwise refinement. You failed. You should probably drop the course. Okay, that looks good. A little harsh, but good. Now, since we've been dealing with, and actually, to be honest, I'm going to move down just a little bit. I guess you can't. We just can't quite get it right because of the lock, but we'll be all right. All right, let's look on the positive side of this. So right now we've only been looking at failures. Let's go ahead and say, well, what happens if somebody does something good, like gets a good piece, like an A or a B or whatever. And you can have the basic question is saying if average is greater than 90, and put our curly brackets in there, then say label text. Actually, I'll do this. You received an A. So it's going to automatically update this. Now, it's not going to conflict with this one because this the average of less than 60 can't be greater than 90. So it can't actually do these both. However, there's always this chance that you can have two conditions that fire. So we never wanted to say you received an A and you failed. Most likely that would be in this case, a logic error. But let's think about this. Let's say I say if average is greater than 80, and I'm going to steal this away and put it down here, and you see the B. What's going to go on here? If I do that, and let's go ahead and put 95s in there, what you get is you received a B. Probably should get rid of the and B. So what happened there? Well, the thing that happened was that it first wrote this, you have an A after this evaluation, but then it did the second evaluation and found that it was also greater than 80, so it received a B. And we don't want that. We want it to say we or the person who's typing in, that they achieved an A. So let's go ahead and do this. But first, because this is bothering me, let's do one other thing. Let's do the greater than or equal to symbol in here. This allows essentially a 90 to be an A, as well as 90.00001 was the only thing allowed to be an A at this point, and above. So the way we're going to fix this is we're going to add an else if. And that's all I have to do. So when you create an else if, it automatically attaches onto the if before it. In most cases, that is its natural structure. You cannot run an else if by itself. Else ifs always have to be after the if statement. But you can string as many as you want to together. So in other words, I could say else, and actually I'm just going to copy this whole thing, because we have C and D to go, right? So if we have 70 here, we say C. And if we have 60 here, we have a D. And now we can figure this out and rerun this correctly. So I can do a 95, 95, 90, 95, and compute. And we receive an A, which is the correct. But if I change this to a 75 and an 85, for math class, I'm going to say that this is an average of 85. It should tell me I have a B. And there you go. So now we have all four of those conditions, and we can even string this last guy in by doing an else if. But why bother doing that? Why don't we have a catch-all statement? So I'm going to instead do just an else. An else will allow, will essentially say if none of these are achieved, then do this. And in this case, we don't have to worry about it being less than 60. The reason being is that it's by definition anything that's not 60 and above. So I can actually take this out. And now this else statement will catch anything that isn't 60 and above, and it says you failed. I guess we can leave it there. I mean, we could say you received an F, but I think this makes the point pretty well. And then, of course, it checks for that zero statement. So that this entire statement that we were using before is now we've cleaned it up a little bit, and now becomes part of this if else statement. Now, do you need to do an else if in order to do an else? No. You could do, if you're taking a pass-fail course, you could just say if it's above a 60, do this, else don't do the latter. Else ifs just allow us to expand this section to as far as we want. But else ifs are not necessary. Ifs, you need that if in order to do an else if, and you need the if in order to do an else, but you don't need an else if to do an else, and you don't need an else to do an else if that doesn't confuse you. All right, let's try this out one more time because I think we're in good shape here. Let's go ahead and put any number in. Let's do 75 this time, so this should tell us that we receive a C. And just to make sure we're happy, let's go ahead and put zeros in there, giving ourselves an F. And it says you failed, and it doesn't say we shouldn't drop the course because we don't have the average of 0. So now we got a fairly flexible system as far as evaluation. Now let's go ahead and play around with some other stuff in the next video.